Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Bold Take Scouting Podcast. Week one of the college football season is right around the corner, so we've got a couple treats for you guys in the form of a way too early 2023 NFL mock draft, because we know everyone loves mock drafts, and accompanying that, our top 20 preseason big boards, which both of them have been released on our Instagram. So if you're happen to be following along on Spotify or Apple Podcasts right now, you might just want to pull that up for reference as we discuss them. Otherwise, we'll be sharing them right on the screen. And we're going to be starting with our mock draft, just discussing some of the picks that really stand out and especially the ones that you guys have been commenting about a lot on our Instagram.
Yeah, so this is first 10 picks of our mock draft. Starting off, we're giving CJ Stroud to the Falcons at number 1. And just a little disclaimer, we're taking the draft order from Tankathon, so these are not our predictions on how teams will fare. So, kind of take these team spots with a grain of salt. We don't know what's going to happen in the NFL season, but if this was the draft order at this point, this is what we'd have the teams doing.
Yeah, I think Stroud at 1 is pretty notable. I thought about maybe we if Anderson's our top player right now, maybe we should give him to the Falcons. But if the Falcons are picking first next year, I think that definitely means that they're in a position to take their long-term quarterback. And I figure someone in this class, probably Stroud or Young, will be going first overall next year, just because they're with 1 year of starting experience under their belt. They're already really advanced. Right now, I take Stroud over Young because I think that he's got the nuances of the game down a bit better. Like, for example, his internal clock is faster. He gets the ball out to receivers without holding it too long and getting in trouble with taking sacks. And so that's why I like Stroud right now. I think he really just checks every box on the football field.
Yeah, I also feel like Stroud has more, physical attributes over Bryce Young as well. I think he's a little bit bigger. I think he's got a bigger arm. Neither of them are true running threats, but I think Stroud is a better runner and built more to run the football occasionally than Bryce Young.
Absolutely. And then so we've got Anderson at 2. He's really the total package, and then followed up by the next quarterback, Bryce Young, at number 3. I would like to see a better deep ball accuracy from Young and getting the ball out faster, but he's just such a good distributor of the football and so accurate after just 1 year of experience. That's really impressive.
Yeah, I mean, he should be. I'd expect him to be the first or second quarterback off the board, unless there's some unforeseen circumstances, which we know that happened last year. We have 3 defensive linemen coming off the board: Jalen Carter, Miles Murphy, Isaiah Foskey from Notre Dame. Anything you want to mention about those 3?
Yeah, I think that we can, touch on this now, even though our big board segment is later. But I have Isaiah Foskey over Miles Murphy, and you've got the opposite, which is reflected here in this mock. So why don't you go ahead and say why you prefer Murphy to Foskey? Because I think it's a really interesting edge one competition here between them, and some other guys might join that mix in the next 9 months as well.
Edge two.
Oh, edge 2, yeah.
So for me, I just like Murphy's size. I really liked his motor. I thought he moves really well for a player of his caliber. I like, his ability against the run and the pass. I know you mentioned with Murphy you were a little bit concerned about his hand usage. I didn't really have a problem with it. I saw, a decent amount of hand fighting techniques and pass rush moves in my evaluation of him. So between the size, the ability against the run and the pass, and I felt comfortable with his hand fighting and his pass rush moves. That's why I have him above Foskey, but both really good players.
Yeah, I think this is a case of not us interpreting things differently, but really just seeing things differently, because I saw that Murphy kind of struggled to use his hands consistently to his advantage. I thought that he needs to really get better with developing pass rush moves and going in with a rush plan rather than just relying on his elite physical traits. Whereas Foskey, I think, has a really good pass arsenal already. And so that's why I got Foskey above Murphy, but they're both definitely really good players. And then Jalen Carter, who we've had above them in this mock draft and above them on our big board, is a really special talent at the defensive tackle position. And he's going to be a premium pass rusher from the interior, which is really rare in the NFL.
Yeah, he is. 7, we have Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. Really, really good tight end prospect. Probably the most well-rounded that I've scouted. I'd take Kyle Pitts' pure receiving ability over Michael Mayer, but you add into account the blocking ability of Mayer. I think that puts him over Pitts and well-roundedness of a tight end for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to explain it. And then next up, we've got the Panthers going with Jackson Smith and Jigba, the wide receiver from Ohio State. He's really just as safe of a prospect as it gets. You asked me to name, 3 players that I'm extremely confident will be going in the first round next year. I think I'd give you Anderson, Carter, and then Jackson Smith and Jigba because he's just such a technician. He runs really good routes, great hands. You really don't see many drops. Good strength to resist route contact too. There are a few holes in his game.
Yeah, he's a really good wide receiver. And at number 9, we have the New York Giants taking Anthony Richardson. That might be a little bit of a surprise for some people. Richardson really hasn't gotten much playing time at all at Florida. I kind of made the call on this pick in regards to his raw physical talent. His arm strength, his arm talent, his athletic ability, off the charts. And I don't think he's a first round prospect at the moment, but just we've seen this trend of super talented raw quarterbacks going in the first round. He's probably not a guy that every team would be confident taking in the first round. To me, the Giants seemed like a really good fit because Brian Daboll worked with Josh Allen in Buffalo. He made Josh Allen into one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So, I think the fit just makes sense to the Giants at 9.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to highlight what Dable managed to get done with Josh Allen. He took a player who was really raw and didn't really put out good tape at Wyoming. He had struggled his rookie year, and now he is genuinely one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the NFL. It's kind of a similar situation with Richardson where he hasn't even been the full-time starter yet, but we know he has maybe the best physical traits of any quarterback in college football. I think if he reaches a certain level of play this year, like where he just establishes himself as a starter, he's productive. He doesn't even need to really be great. I think that he just needs to hit a certain threshold for NFL teams to take him in the first round because he has those traits that you're really willing to bank on in terms of developing your quarterback.
Yeah, totally. And rounding out the top 10, we have Peter Skoronski, the tackle from Northwestern. I think people might be a little bit concerned with Skoronski's length. He's not the prototypical offensive tackle size and arm length, but I'm hoping at least that teams will have learned from Rashawn Slater, who's a really good player. And you mentioned that as well, that, Rashawn Slater was knocked because of his arm length. People weren't sure if he could play tackle in the NFL. And, obviously he has been a really good tackle to this point in his young career. So hopefully people will learn from that.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between Skoronski and Slater. I think with neither of them are you getting a guy who's going to maul and dominate in the run game, but you're getting rock solid pass protectors who might not have the length that you look for, but they are athletic and they are really, really good technicians. So we saw Slater translate into a pro bowler early in his NFL career. I think Skoronski might have a similar future. And moving on to the second part of our mock draft, we've got Brian Bresee going to the Steelers at number 11. I think he's a guy who has a big range of outcomes in 2022 because he has, he's a 5-star recruit. He's got elite traits, but you only see them in flashes on the football field. And he ended up missing most of last season with an injury. So he's got to bounce back and be healthy. And the next up, we got another defensive lineman, Andre Carter, who we both really like. He's 6'7", 260. He's got length and height for days. He's just such a unique prospect from a physical standpoint, and it's already resulted in 15 and a half sacks last year, where even though he's kind of raw. So, I mean, he gets to put together a pass rush arsenal. He can be really, really special.
Yeah, and moving on, 13 and 14, the Vikings and the Texans. We have pair of wide receivers, Jordan Addison from Pittsburgh, Kayshon Boutte from LSU. I think both those guys, to me, really similar prospects, and they're ranked really closely on both of our boards in our top 20. But I think both of the guys could be really productive wide receivers early on in their career, and I think whoever's a quarterback for the Texans, whoever's a quarterback for the Vikings, I think they would both make great additions to that wide receiver room.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're pairing true wide receiver ones like Jefferson and Brandon Cooks with really good wide receiver twos that would elevate those passing offenses. And next up, we've got a pair of defensive backs. We got Eli Ricks, the cornerback from Alabama, who just transferred in from LSU. That was a big get for Bama going to the Raiders. I think he really just needs to show that he's focused on football and he can stay healthy because he has had a serious injury in his past as well as an arrest this offseason. So he's got all the physical traits and the ability, just really needs to put it together and stay clean. Whereas the next pick, Jordan Battle, is I think as a safer prospect, also from Alabama, the safety. He's a bit of a lack of urgency in the run game, but really, really good in man coverage, and that's highly valued from that position in the NFL.
Yeah, and then 17, Trenton Simpson, the linebacker from Clemson, and this guy really reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Simmons. I feel like they play a really similar role in that Clemson defense. He's got all the traits. We just have seen Isaiah Simmons struggle to translate his game to the NFL, and that just gives me a little bit of a concern with Simpson. Just, similar players that were used similarly in college. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays this year and if he's, relegated to more of one position or if he's still that kind of do-it-all, jack-of-all-trades linebacker that he is right now.
Yeah, I think it's a really common theme in this draft class heading into the 2022 season that a lot of these guys have elite traits, but they're really yet to put it together. So it's going to be really interesting to see who manages to take that next step in terms of technique and nuances of their respective positions and who kind of stays an unfinished product and loses traction because they didn't take the big step forward that people are expecting. At number 18, we got, a running back. That's high for 18, but Bijan Robinson really has everything. He checks every single box. Nick Sirianni ran the ball more than any other offense in the league last year for the Eagles. And it was with a collection of running backs where none of them is really a top 15 running back in the league. He would have a field day with Robinson. And at 19, we got Jermaine Burton, a wide receiver from Bama. It's almost like next man up out of that offense from Bama receivers. And then 20 is a guy I really like, Felix Enudike-Uzoma, the defensive end from Kansas State. I think he's got really good traits, and I expect the flashes to turn into consistency, and that might be foreshadowed by his 4-sack outing that he had against TCU, which is really, look up Felix Enudike-Uzoma versus TCU and just enjoy it because that was one of the best individual performances I've watched really by any player in the last few years of scouting.
Dominant performance. And now we'll pull up our last 11 picks of the draft. I think it's worth noting the Dolphins, obviously, they have a pick from the 49ers, their own pick. They got forfeited from their tampering charges with Tom Brady. Obviously, we're a scouting page, so I'm not really into the NFL news, but that is why the Dolphins only have one pick in the first round. And then at 21, we have the Seahawks taking B.J. Ojulari, defensive end from LSU. He's a guy that I think has some traits. He's a little bit on the thinner side, which concerns me a little bit. I'd like to see him bulk up a little bit more, but he's got athleticism. He's got great speed and great bend off the edge. So he's a guy that I think I would like to see him prove some things to be able to solidify his name in the first round, but definitely has that potential.
Yeah, absolutely. And Noah Sewell's another guy who I think is probably a fair bet for the first round. The brother Penei Sewell, similarly to Penei, he's got really good traits and he's reached a good level of play already. 23, we've got Broderick Jones, offensive tackle from Georgia, heading to Miami. And 24, we got a guy that we have interviewed, actually, Mekhi Garner, cornerback from LSU. I think he made a really good move transferring from Louisiana to LSU this year. LSU churns out defensive backs. He's got elite traits. He's 6'2". He's well built. He's got fluidity. He's got speed to carry runs or routes vertically. I think he's really solid. He's a guy who's slept on right now. You don't hear his name much in the cornerback one conversation, but I think it should be there. Same thing with the next guy, Cam Smith, who, might not have the traits of the others, but they're still definitely above average. And I think he's the best technician of all the cornerbacks in the class so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned the cornerback one conversation. Cam Smith is both of our cornerback ones, and we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to our big board. three cornerbacks in a row were him and Joey Porter, the Bengals at number 26, and the guy that we might want to talk about a little bit, Grayson Mccall at 27 to the Detroit Lions. To me, that was just really a team fit. I think he fits the culture of that team. I feel like coming from Coastal Carolina, he's got an underdog mentality. And he kind of helped bring that program to where it is right now. And I feel like he fits the Lions culture, the Lions team, and they're looking for a quarterback.
Yeah, he absolutely does. I agree with that. And I honestly I cannot wait to see what the NFL thinks of Grayson Mccall because we love him. It's been 2 off seasons in a row that we do heading into the season. We think he has true first round potential because he's really accurate, takes care of the ball, good decision making, and he doesn't have elite physical traits, but they're all above average. He's got solid size. He's athletic. He can pick up chunks of yardage with his leg. He's got a good arm strength. I know that the offense is really simplistic and it'll be a really big adjustment to the NFL, but do NFL decision makers see what we see? That's something that I really can't wait for when McCall eventually does put his name in the NFL draft process.
Yeah, and wrapping up the end of the first round, Brandon Joseph, the safety at number 28 to the Packers, Parker Washington, wide receiver at number 29 to the Chiefs, and then we have our final quarterback, Will Levis, number 30 to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was more of a, the Buccaneers are probably looking for a quarterback. It doesn't really seem like Kyle Trask is the quarterback of the future. He's still not listed as the quarterback 2 on that depth chart. So I think, we might have been able to make that prediction scouting him 2 years ago that he probably wouldn't be a true starter in the NFL. So Will Levis might be a guy that they could take at the end of the first round and, maybe turn him into the quarterback of the future for Tampa.
Yeah, I think it would make sense. At some point, they need to, put in a bigger investment than the late second round pick that they gave for Kyle Trask because, Tom Brady has won them a Super Bowl, but life after Tom Brady is going to be coming pretty quick. We got, a little taste of that this offseason with his temporary retirement. And at 31, rounding out the mock draft, we have Macy Smith, the defensive lineman from Michigan. He was actually the number 1 on Bruce Feldman's annual freak list, in which from The Athletic, Bruce Feldman highlights, the top athletes, the guys with the best size and athletic combination in college football. So, when you see him topping that list, he might not really have the experience or the production yet at Michigan, but there are traits that NFL scouts are going to fall in love with.
Yeah, he was, if you haven't read what Bruce Feldman put out there on Macy Smith, it was wild things. Definitely deserving of that top spot. Now we'll bring up our big board. So starting off with our top 10, obviously we mentioned we have Will Anderson, number 1. I don't think that really should come to a surprise to anyone. He's the best player in the draft, and I'd expect him to maintain that spot heading into come April, May. He's going to be the top player in the draft. 2, we both have Jalen Carter, really good defensive tackle. We talked about him a little bit in the mock draft. And our top 3, the same as well. C.J. Stroud, again, best quarterback in the draft in our opinion. I think he's got the edge on Bryce Young. Both the athletic talent, the arm strength, I think is a little bit better. So yeah, I think C.J. Stroud still, honestly, I wouldn't be shocked if Bryce Young takes that spot after the end of the season if he can really improve on all of his things that we would like to see him improve on.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And there's so much left a lot of football left to play with a full season left. I mean, let's not forget that a year ago we had Spencer Rattler number 1 and Sam Howell number 2, and that did not turn out well. So, maybe we should chill out a little bit with the certainties. Right now we got Stroud 1, Young 2. Hopefully they won't end up going back to school and going in the 5th round like those 2 from last year. I'm pretty confident that won't be the case, but yeah, I'm definitely open to switching those 2 and having Young over Stroud if he earns it this year on tape from my point of view.
Yeah, and rounding out our top 5, I have Myles Murphy up at number 4. You have him down, I think, at number 8. Obviously, you mentioned the concerns that you have with his pass rush moves and his hand fighting. I don't really have those concerns, but again, like you mentioned, just difference in what we see on tape. And it's quite possible that maybe I watched a game later in the season, and maybe you didn't. So definitely think that he could be, a top 5 player come draft season. And I think, if you think that he improves his hand fighting technique, do you think he could rise into your top 5?
Oh, absolutely. We projected him in the mock draft going in the top 5 because he's got some really elite traits. You talk about, the strength, the power, the size, the athleticism, the burst. It's all there with Myles Murphy.
Yeah, and then our number 1 wide receiver, like we mentioned before, Jackson Smith and Jigba. Don't really need to repeat what we said about him. I have him at 5, you have him at 6. Just a really good talent all around. I don't see any true weaknesses in his game. He lacks that true top-end speed, but to me that's not really a problem because of all the other things he can do. I think he's still dynamic with the ball in his hands. He can make guys miss. And he's not slow. He just doesn't have 4.3 speed like we're used to seeing in some of the top wide receivers.
Yeah, and so then we got Skoronski, pretty 5 for me, 7 for you. Isaiah Foskey's up there for me too. We got Bijan Robinson at number 9. I just want to say that I have him that high because I think he's already the player he's going to be in the NFL. I don't think there's that much developing left to do. He's going to be a star running back in the NFL. I don't quite think that I'm going to have him ranked as a top 10 player in the class. It's just that other guys are going to take that step forward because they have the traits right now, but not the production, not the refinement. And I think they'll get better at that. And I think they'll pass him, and Robinson will, end up maybe in the teens. But he's a stud, and he's going to be really helping an NFL offense. And then at 10, I got Bryce Young. You've got Kayshon Boutte, and I've got Boutte up in the teens with Addison right above him. And I think we detailed in a previous podcast why that is. But you went with Boutte over Addison because he's got better hands. Addison had a few more drops, whereas for me, I thought they were just really similar prospects all around. Really athletic, good route running, great after the catch, but not really jump ball guys. They struggle a bit facing route contact. And what I went down to, even though I don't often look at this, is the difference in production. Addison had 1,000 more yards than Boutte last season. And, you're supposed to scout the traits, not the production. But I think to an extent, as a tiebreaker, I think it's a valid point, and that's what led me to Addison over Boutte.
Yeah. Let's talk about Cam Smith a little bit. He's both our cornerback 1s. I have him at 13. You have him at 16. What did you see in Cam Smith to make him your cornerback 1 when most people don't seem to have him that high?
Yeah, I love Cam Smith in press coverage. He is just such a technician with being able to land his jam right into the wide receiver's chest, disrupt him right off the snap. And then he's really good at crowding the wide receivers to the sideline. So he's a really physical guy, but you don't really see him drawing many flags either. So that's a combination that you don't often see in college. The physical guys are usually grabby downfield, and you have to live with that a little bit. I think Cam Smith's already got that under control. He's got good size, good athleticism, good fluidity to turn and run with the receivers. I just really see a clean cornerback who I can trust in the NFL against veteran wide receivers. Whereas, Eli Ricks has even better traits, but he's yet to put it together really. And I mentioned, the injury concern and the arrest on his CV. And, Kelly Ringo is a player that we don't have in our top 20, even though a lot of people have him above Smith, because when I watch his tape, he does have elite size, but I think it sacrifices a bit his ability to mirror wide receivers closely. I don't think he's sticky enough in coverage. He loses, top route runners, burners. Like there's a couple different profiles of wide receivers that get him, and that's really not good in my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat what you said about the first 2 cornerbacks. For me, Cam Smith also shows good ball skills. He locates the ball in the air well. I saw him bat down a few passes in the few game tapes that I watched. So that's always a huge plus as well when the ball's thrown their way. And for Ringo, I think I saw too much zone coverage and not enough effective man coverage. When I'm taking a cornerback high in the first round, I want to know that I can trust him in man coverage. I feel like zone is something you can teach a player more than man,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. So I think if a guy's good in man coverage, he should be good in zone. And if he's not, you have him play man on one side, zone on the other side of the defense. But I don't think that can be done the opposite, where someone's playing zone, everyone else is playing man. Obviously, that wouldn't really work out. So Ringo, for me, I felt like, he let up way too many easy catches. I know if he was in zone, whatever, but 5-yard catches turning into 8, 9-yard catches, to me, not really a big fan of that. I feel like we talked about most of these guys on our top 20 already. Andre Carter, Noah Sewell, Grayson Mccall, Rasee, Trenton Simpson, Enudike, Uzoma. Anything you want to mention about our top 20 before we wrap this up?
Yeah, what? How about we talk about the guys who aren't here, the guys who because we did talk about most of these guys when we were doing our mock draft. So there's a few guys we scouted who we left off of the mock draft and of the big board. Maybe can just give an explanation for why. Like one guy who comes to mind is Paris Johnson, and I really like Paris Johnson at guard. I think that he's an elite uh run blocker, and he's good in pass protection. I don't like when he gets isolated, when he loses the guys on either side of him, because I feel like he can't contain the guy opposite him. Although when he is in close quarters in a phone booth, I think he succeeds. The problem with my projection of him is that he's moving to left tackle this season, and I just don't think that's the position for him. I don't think he's going to be able to have the lateral quickness to get out in his kick slide and seal the edge against speedy rushers. I think that's going to give him a lot of difficulties.
Yeah, I think he's got a really good amount of power in the run game. I think, like you mentioned, he struggles when he's stuck on an island, left alone a little bit. I think his position in the NFL also will be guard. So I think that's part of the reason why I left him off as well. I think he might struggle a little bit at tackle. Who was your 21st guy that you just left off?
My 21st guy. I think that was Will Levis, actually. Yeah. But I think yeah.
Mine was Anthony Richardson.
Yeah.
Just the traits to me just jump off the screen. And I couldn't put him in the top 20 just because he hasn't really played. But I mean, if this guy's sitting, 16, 17, if he puts everything together, the sky is the limit for that quarterback, Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, it's a very similar situation with Will Levis. I just have Levis over Richardson because they both have great physical profiles, but Levis has just shown a little bit more because he's more experienced. But it's going to be really interesting to see how these quarterbacks shake out. I'm going to be following them week by week because it's going to look quite different in the spring, I think, than it does now. That's how it was last year, how it was every year, really, last few years. And we've always had a few surprises like Joe Burrow, like Kenny Pickett, like Zach Wilson. Really intrigued to see if there's going to be yet another one of those guys rising out of the mid to late rounds from the summer and going first round.
I feel like there will be. I'm not going to throw out any names because I don't think anyone would have named Kenny Pickett last year, and no one would have named Zach Wilson. But I have a feeling there will be, come the end of the college football season. I think wrapping this up, though, I think the common thread between most of these guys, besides maybe the guys in the top 4 or 5, is that they have great physical talent, great traits. They haven't just put it all together yet. And I think that's what you expect to see going into what one would expect to be their final collegiate season. You hope, all right, they have all these traits, they have all this talent. Can they put it all together and refine their skills, refine their tool set, and give us more confidence that they can be a really good NFL player?
Yeah, we saw a lot of the same thing with that theme throughout our scouting, but it's also really useful because now when we watch their tape after the season in December, January, and throughout the draft process, we really get this point of view of where were they before the season and where are they now, and whether or not they improved really helps us projecting them to the NFL, because if a guy's on an upwards trajectory, then he's probably going to continue that in the NFL, and he's going to be able to be successful in his early years and get better and better.
Yeah, and with that said, that wraps up our podcast for the week. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks for watching. If you haven't seen our mock draft on our big board, check it out on Instagram. We'll be back with another episode.